The problems that we've seen through 2 weeks with this Ravens team are a mixture of issues that are both new as well as ones we've seen before, but winning sometimes makes us forget the flaws. Despite these facts, I still have a lot of hope for this 2024 team. While I wouldn't call myself a full-blown optimist, I think it's worth mentioning the successes as much as the failures for this team through 2 weeks of play. Instead of simply regurgitating information to you, I want to do something a little different for this video. I feel like as a fan base, we have become used to winning in the Lamar Jackson era, and so losing is a very bitter pill to swallow. So let's make this information more digestible. I'll be delivering it to you in a way known as a compliment sandwich. I'll talk about something that the team is doing well, whether expected or unexpected, and I'll follow it up with something that the team needs to improve upon. I will, of course, be backing up the good and the bad with stats, as well as explaining what we've seen on the field. With the explanation out of the way, let's get to it. Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and in this video, we'll be discussing several of the issues that we've seen so far this season on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. But for this video, let's start out with our first offensive sandwich, and it revolves around the run game. During the Ravens' first game, there was heavy criticism of Derrick Henry only getting 13 carries to Lamar Jackson's 16, as well as Justice Hill being on the field for more snaps than Henry. Well, it seems that in the Raiders game, Derrick Henry was going to be their lead back no matter what. The problem is, if he's running outside zone but can't get to the edge, he's getting hit in the backfield for a loss, as we saw several times against the Raiders. This offensive line, especially on the right side, is absolutely the weakest point on this team right now, and if John Harbaugh continues to be stubborn with his approach and it doesn't pay off soon, he may just doom this season for the Ravens, wasting another year of Lamar Jackson's prime. Our next offensive sandwich is somewhat similar, but this time it's about the ability, or lack thereof, in protecting Lamar Jackson in the pocket. Again, our problem comes from the right side of the offensive line, where 2 weeks in a row, Faalele and Makari are getting beat really bad sometimes, and Lamar is left on his own to hopefully do Lamar Jackson things on every dropback. Again, we as a fan base are lucky we have Lamar Jackson, but the problem is, if this keeps up, how long will we have Lamar Jackson? Our next sandwich is more of a coin flip, as we don't know which Rashad Bateman is going to show up on any given play. He'll make a great catch for a first down, then, as we saw against the Raiders, let a ball bounce right off his hands into awaiting defenders, and then come right back out and make an incredible catch that's way more difficult than the one he just dropped. I still think that Bateman can be a huge asset for this offense, but he has got to shore up the fundamental aspects he seems to be lacking in his game. Now let's move on to our first defensive sandwich, and this sandwich is about how great the Ravens have done against the run so far, and how poorly they've responded to the pass. I will get into the numbers a little later on and discuss some interesting trends with you, but suffice it to say, I am surprised by how improved the Ravens have been against the run given what we saw in the preseason, and how poorly they've done against the pass given the star power in this secondary. Our next defensive sandwich is again a surprise on one end and an unfortunate reality on the other. The Ravens' pass rush is another topic we'll get into just a bit later in more detail, but again, it has been a very welcome surprise so far through 2 weeks. What has also been a surprise, but maybe shouldn't have been so much so, is some of the miscommunications and poor play calls for the Ravens' secondary, especially late in some games. The two most obvious examples that come to mind are the second touchdown of Xavier Worthy, where Marlon didn't receive any help over the top, and against the Raiders, where Brandon Stephens, who made a great play on the ball, was left on an island with Devontae Adams, who had been beating the Ravens secondary for the entirety of the fourth quarter. With this being Zachary Orr's first season as the Ravens defensive coordinator and his first time calling plays, there will of course be hiccups like this. If you guys will take a second to remember the Miami game in 2022 and how that game ended, we criticized Mike Macdonald pretty badly after that loss. Let's just hope that Orr can make a rebound the way Macdonald did. The last sandwich we have today is one for the special teams. Unfortunately, this sandwich is not going to taste nearly as good as it has more bad in it than the others. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with Justin Tucker over the past 2 seasons, but it really seems like his accuracy and not his strength are starting to fail him. He's still excellent inside the 50, and as I just said, his leg strength isn't the problem, which makes me think this is somehow a mental block for him. As far as punting, the one by Jordan Stout at the end of the Raiders game, which went all of about 24 yards, is a reoccurring concern. I again have to think that this is more of a mental than physical issue. The Ravens still, of course, have on staff one of the greatest to ever do it in Sam Cook, but that doesn't necessarily mean he can coach the mentality needed to perform in high-pressure moments into stout like Cook did. But now let's go over some of the offensive positives that we've seen through the first two games, starting with Lamar Jackson. We've obviously seen him throw the ball more to start this season than any before. So far, Lamar has thrown the ball 75 times through two games. The next closest mark to that is when he threw the ball 59 times during the first two games of the 2022 season. The most impressive and also worrying stat to me is that he's first overall in the league with total offensive yards, meaning that the Ravens are asking him to be Superman again already. Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely are off to a nice start this year, combining for 48% of Lamar's targets and 50% of his passing yardage. Although I am, of course, a fan of spreading the ball around throughout the game, if these two continue producing at the clip they're at right now, we could see our first pair of 1,000-yard pass catchers for the Ravens. The last topic I have for offensive positives is Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the run game. While obviously Henry had a slow start in Kansas City, it was Lamar who took a back seat for most of the game against the Raiders. With Henry averaging 4.2 yards per carry and Lamar averaging 8 yards per carry, this duo was starting to shape up to be just as dangerous as we had hoped in the preseason. Now we just need the offensive line to block for both of them, rushing or passing. Now let's get into the Ravens defense because there's a disturbing trend I'm seeing coming out of the Ravens secondary. As you can see on the screen, the Ravens excel at stopping the run but struggle a whole lot more against the pass. Now, part of this is of course due to them playing Patrick Mahomes, a quarterback who often throws more than 600 times a season, and Gardner Minshew, who had no run game to speak of and is already a gunslinger by nature. Let's give these stats some context and compare them to teams who are undefeated so far this season. It's not only that the Ravens are allowing more passing yards, it's that teams are doing more damage to the Ravens with those passing attempts and yards than they are to other teams. The Chiefs only have one less passing yard against them than the Ravens do, yet they're 2-0. The Chargers, from a defensive scoring perspective, are best in the league, and a lot of that comes down to them controlling the clock. Through their first two games, the Chargers had the ball for 15 minutes and 49 seconds longer than their opponents. The Ravens, on the other hand, held the ball for 8 minutes and 22 seconds longer than their opponents. If you can keep the opposing offense off the field, you limit their ability to score. And that has mattered for the Ravens a lot more towards the end of each game. Mainly due to their incredible run defense, the Ravens haven't surrendered the most yards. In fact, they're only 18th in that category with a combined 613. And despite only being penalized 9 times on defense, which is good enough for 4th best so far, they have allowed the most passing first downs against them than anyone else. Another unfortunate statistic for the Ravens is that they've allowed the second most yards after the catch than any other team in the league. Despite this, their pass rush is getting home more often than most teams, as they're tied with 7 other teams who have recorded 7 sacks, and only 2 teams have more than that, the Texans and the Vikings. So again, it surprises me that it's our secondary which is letting our defense down, and not the run defense or pass rush, both considered more of a question mark and concern before the season started. The completion percentage is 3rd highest in the league. They're 23rd in the league in passes defended, and while there are only 8 teams who have a higher passer rating against them, those teams include the Colts, the Panthers, the Commanders, the Giants, not the company a Baltimore Ravens defense should be finding itself in. No offense to those other teams, but the Ravens have a different standard to uphold on defense. One of the worst parts about it is that we aren't getting teams off the field enough. Not only are we in the bottom third for turning the ball over, we also give other teams a head start as we give our opponents the 4th closest starting position for their drives, which average out to the 35.7 yard line. And to top it all off, as you guys see here, we are 28th in the league as far as points allowed, with our average between the two games being 26.5 points per game. Players say it, fans say it, and coaches say it all the time. Take away the run, make them one-dimensional, and control the game. The Ravens have done 2 out of those 3 things, for the most part, in both games this season. But as we have seen in both fourth quarters, we very much do not control the game. The Ravens don't have a lot of time to get their act together before the snowball gets too big. This Sunday, the Ravens travel to Dallas where they'll face Dak Prescott, who's thrown the ball 71 times this season. The Ravens got abused by Devontae Adams, so how will they deal with CeeDee Lamb? After that, the Bills come to Baltimore, and Josh Allen may not throw the ball that much, but his average quarterback rating through 2 games is at 124.2, and he has yet to throw an interception. I hope I didn't put too sour of a finish on this, but the Ravens have some serious problems, and they need some serious solutions if they want to back up all the talk from the preseason about being locked in this year. And that goes just as much for the coaches as it does the players. Now, you guys may not have enjoyed this video, but if you did, or at least found it interesting, leave it a like. Subscribe if you're new, and comment down below your thoughts, both positive or negative, on how this Ravens team has done or will do this season. As always, guys, stay safe out there, and go Ravens.